Welcome to the Truth Has No Sides podcast. These conversations will be had to expand the minds and the consciousness of you, the listener. If you like the content of the show, please like the video and subscribe to our channel to help this message be seen and heard by more people. Thank you for being here and enjoy the episode. Okay, two red dots. We got a special guest today. A cousin of mine referred him to me. I've been looking forward to this one. He's a very busy man. We've been trying to get together for the last couple of months. He's finally here. Michael, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. So will you let the world know your name, where you're from, raised, stuff like that? And as usual, we'll start going into the story and we'll just go off on tangents because it's a podcast. We have as long as we want.
Yeah, so the accurate pronunciation is Ulibarri. It's a Basque name, from this region between France and Spain, the Basque region. Ulibarri is kind of just what people recognize it as in Utah. It's pretty like the standard. There's not a lot of us here, and really none of us are really related, but it's just such an uncommon name that people. So yeah, I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah, born and raised. I grew up in Rose Park. I was born in, I guess, Poplar Grove. Back then we just called West Side, I guess Glendale area. Grew up here, and I moved around a lot as an adult.
Okay. Tell me, how old are you?
47.
Okay. Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect, man. Happy birthday. So what was it like growing up in Utah?
So, I guess I can't give this as an overview of Utah as a representation.
Okay.
I can tell you how I grew up.
Yes.
So I grew up the youngest of 9. I am the youngest by 11 years. My mother had 8 kids from a previous marriage. Wasn't the greatest marriage. Left, and 11 years later, I came around. Dad was never really. My dad was around, but not in a. He wasn't a father really. He's kind of a provider. Helped my mom, finances and stuff. Never really stepped into that role. All my siblings had, were like the closest one was 11 years up to 20 years. My oldest sister is 20 years older than me. From as early as I can remember, they were always in something. Like at that time, my oldest sister was already into drugs, along with my uncles who came back from like Vietnam and stuff like that. They were already into like heroin and just struggling from just struggles that they had from the war. And my family owned most of the bars in the Salt Lake City area.
Okay.
My Uncle Joe, he owned, but it's like now it's on 6th South and State. It used to be the Annex back in the days. The Bottoms Up, Rose Bar, all these like bars that there was like, in the hood, type stuff. And which was all like through drug money. My family was really heavily involved in like drug trafficking, and so I grew up in that environment and in that lifestyle. Like we would ride our bikes and stop at the bar to get a soda because my sisters worked there and everybody. But because a lot of drugs came through there, my siblings coming from a single parent home, they gravitated towards the guys who had money and, partying. For some people, having some drinks and doing some lines, for some people it ends there, and for some people it ends them down like a long road of addiction. My oldest sister still struggles with addiction in her 60s. Certainly. So I just grew up. My brother's in and out of prison. I think at least 3 of my sisters have been in prison, including myself. So all 3 boys. My nephews, which are both close to my age, one's my oldest sister's sons, they kind of grew up with me because my sister was in and out of prison. They both went to prison. Both of my nephews that are my age. I got a nephew that just got life in prison, plus 30, just like 6 or 7 months ago. I got a bunch of other families in and out of prison. So we grew up with that. It's kind of just, but it wasn't just my. When I grew up, I carried a lot of shame because I thought it was just my family, but really, I know so many families that grew up between Rose Park and Glendale that was the same fate. Um, so before I was offered a job or opportunity anywhere else, like I was offered pounds of weed to sell.
Yeah.
So that's the route that I took as a young kid. Um,
How young were you when that started?
oh man, I don't know, probably 14, 13, 14. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. And I probably could have had access to it. I had access to it way sooner,
Yeah.
but it wasn't until like that time where friends that I knew started smoking weed, or so then I had clients and stuff. Um, but yeah, my families are my brother and my cousin started one of the oldest gangs here in Utah. Um, I actually ended up being from a rival gang from them, but it was kind of a roundabout way. But yeah, I grew up in gangs. My family's heavily entrenched in gangs here still. Um, excuse me. Yeah, so I just grew up in that lifestyle, really. My I had stability at home, but whenever my mom had to take in my nieces and nephews, her husband wasn't going for it, so my mom would have to move out, and it'd be like my mom trying to raise me and a couple of my nephews or multiple. Sometimes we'd have 4, 5, 6 people in the house. My mom, just making ends meet. Yeah, it wasn't all bad though. I mean, for what I chose the bad path, I guess, just because it was the path that was like more easily laid out to me. But I was also exposed to a lot of like community members, community builders in the community. Um, I just didn't take that route. That's just early on. It was just the draw of the street life and things that come with that. And I think we grow up in environments where we feel less than. So if we could find ways to like take back our power, then we do. And in environments like that, it's usually through gangs and violence, right, or drugs, and having money where you could, money buys things, makes things happen too, type
Yes.
thing. So you just find ways, right? Like um, just going through therapy, I've in trauma and learning about like how young men act out during trauma and how young women act out. And that was just my environment. That's what I saw all day, every day. I never saw anything different. So
Yeah.
I never really pushed for anything different. Um, yeah, so I just kind of took that trajectory. I got involved in the system around 13, the juvenile system. I went through every possible thing that you could imagine in the juvenile system, all the way up to secure care, up until I was just about 3 months past 18. During that time, from 13 to 18, may had like every time I was out, it may have been like 2 or 3 months at the most in between. But yeah, I was always running from group homes, Proctor homes, anywhere I could, they would let me out. I would just be going. But that was everybody. That was everybody that I knew growing up. So it was hard to like, peer pressure was tough. Even, it's funny because a lot of the guys, we were all rivals back in the days. We all are older and we talk now. I've been kind of fortunate because I was always locked up with them and I would always run and knew how to steal cars. It was always cool with those guys, right? So, but we see each other nowadays and we we just talk about like the things that we dealt with and we struggled with. But it was normal. I don't know any. I know very few males that didn't go to prison, you know, and if they were the square dudes, or they just got lucky. But
Hmm.
I mean, I'd say of my peers growing up, I'd say 70% went to prison, or at least through jail, and that part, or ended up in some kind of addiction. Um,
When, yeah, how would you know any different? How would you know any different? I mean, if it's it's like that Plato's cave. Like that's all they knew. All they knew were the shadows on the wall.
Yeah,
All you knew was that.
yeah.
It wasn't wrong. It wasn't out of place. If you were just, holy shit. Um, when was there fear going through what you were going through, or was that just all you knew? So that's just your reaction. That's how you acted around it. That's just, was there fear going to jail? Was there fear going to prison? Was it because you knew all these guys? You were in there with guys you knew, and I mean, I don't even really know the questions to ask. I mean, this is incredible.
Um, I think it's all based around fear,
Okay.
right? I think that's how we um, establish this alter ego, I guess, if that's the right term.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I know these guys on different terms now, I see that now that we think that we haven't, now that we know we have a choice to not act that way or be that way or continue to be that way. A lot of people like are questioning a lot of them are questioning their sanity, right? Like, um, we, because we were always scared. Like I mean, you got people shooting at you. I got stab wounds here and here. I got bullet wounds. I mean, and so do a lot of people that I know. So when you're living that life, you're just in constant fear. And I think that's where that, like, the anger and rage comes from, is like, okay, I have to survive. I have to continue to push forward in this fear, right? My therapist kind of explained it like revving a motorcycle. We're like on seven all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but we learn to live that way.
Yeah.
Like I still struggle. Like I'm very sporadic. I still have like, for me, like if I don't have like a shot of coffee and I'm really high energy and I'm just normal, I don't feel normal. But
Really.
it's because of that, right? Like I've just been on charge my whole life.
Yeah.
So you grow up and that's that fear. You grow up in that. Because if you're a square, there might be the dudes that pick on people that are like good in school, right? Like there's those guys. So you could be that, or you could, choose to be the opposite, right? Some people go and pick on those guys, and some people just go out and gangbang, and that's what we did because we didn't know how to channel that fear or tell anybody. Like you can't say, I'm scared to go to school, I'm scared to walk to school because so and so and their friends are gonna, do this or do that. Like they're gonna do that, so you just got to be prepared, right? So I think it's all based in fear. It's based in fear of like people not liking you, people thinking you're a certain way, fear of getting beat up, fear of rejection. And to be honest, truthfully, man, it's kind of sad to say, but that's what the girls in that environment are attracted to,
Yeah.
right? The hustlers, the gangbangers, the dudes that dress nice, always fly, always fresh. That's what they like, right? So when you look at when my options, just right there on North Temple and 8th West downtown, I got winos, which back then we would call like people call unsheltered. Now we'd call them the winos. They were just all the native guys, Native American guys, who would drink like Thunderbird, and there'd be like people walking up and down North Temple, right? Back when I was then, that was still the same as it is now. I don't know if you're familiar with that area.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with that? Yeah, yeah. So um, we saw that. We saw that as one alternative, or those alternatives. You're either out down there all messed up on drugs or prostitution or sitting down there with the winos, or you're going to try to make some money and make it out. Because the only people that I knew that were successful that made it out and got established businesses all did it through hustling,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'll do it through dope. You get you a couple 100,000, you get your meal, and then you start a business and you cash out.
Hmm.
That's everybody's thing. But some people, like for me, I just didn't make it. I went through the adult system. I exited the adult system at the age of 40. And I went directly from juvenile. I was out 6 months. I got out of juvenile, was out 6 months, just hanging out with my homies. We went to do a drug deal, went bad. Somebody lost their life. We go up to we go up to prison. So I was in prison at the age of 19, all the way to the age of 27. That was my first time. and it didn't understand sense. But yeah, it was all I knew. It was no different. It the fear didn't go away, but it became easier, right? You learn
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
only because you learn how to navigate,
Yeah.
right? Like for me, it was really easy because even though I came from Rose Park and I came from the opposite side, I had always been done good by all the Polynesians and the Asians and the Crips and all those guys. So whenever I was around, they showed me love, you know. But you just learn those ways. You learn those ways to navigate and find ways to be safe, right? Because my gang, when it went in there, it was just a few of us. And most of them just decided to go to college and survive their sentences because they all had, 7, 10, 15, 20-year sentences. And they all just decided to establish, there's a few of them that are still around, but we weren't a big enough of a clique to really go in there and survive among some of the bigger ones. So we either had to, stay out the way or, click up with the bigger group, which eventually they did. They clicked up with the Norteños, but when we were there, we just kind of we had one big incident, but other than that, like we just kind of did our thing, got out, and all those guys are out. But they all did a long time, right? They all did 7, 9, 10, 12, 15. I think uh, Philip did 20 or 18, somewhere around there. Um, but it was also all those guys that grew up in the juvenile system with. There was that super predator. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term.
No.
So it was I kind of have a really bad taste in my mouth about it because they tricked me into interviewing for it. But a super predator was a term that came out from youth that grew up in those environments from like 90. I want to say at least 94, but it might have been like even 92, but I think 94 to like 2000.
Okay.
And it was just this crazy spike in violent crimes,
Okay.
right? It was like we were young. We just got hit with all this wave of gangs from California. Um, the Colors came out, the movie Colors, and that's how two of the biggest gangs here started, Diamond Street and 21st Street. Straight off of that movie, they copied them. And at first, they were just cliques of friends, and then the Polynesians came from Tonga and Samoa, and they were like dealing with culture shock. We were making fun of them because they couldn't speak English, and they started beating us up. So we started clicking up, and then you just see this formation of gangs just right there in the city. Like I got my friend Mesa. Um, he was part of Oriental Posse, and they were the first gang in Utah to get RICO Act. He did 27 years, just got out like a year and a half. Yeah. Um, so just this group of guys, right? So that super predator term, I understand where they were trying to go with it, research wise, but it was really a bunch of jaded information, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there was just this. I say that to say there was just this time something happened. I don't know what it was because during that time I lost a lot of friends. And it's funny because people say, "Oh, Utah this, Utah that," but before I was 18 or 19, well, not necessarily. Well, I would say I would call them friends because at one point in time in elementary and junior high, we were all friends.
Mm-hmm.
High school is when it started clicking off, and but by the time we were in high school, I don't know, probably I don't know, 10, 12 guys had been killed. And I'm just talking about right here in Rose Park in Glendale. That's what 21 blocks, 21, 30 blocks, 40 blocks now, maybe 40 blocks by 600 west to the freeway, which is, I don't know, like that's not a lot of square mileage, right? And it's still that, right? And
It's still.
we, the, yeah, the guys, yeah, and it's moved more towards West Valley now, but it's still, Rose Park is still the epicenter. It's just, people have moved out, right? Because of the city's gotten too expensive or, they're pushing people out, but people move to West Valley. So those gangs that are rooted in West Valley and Rose Park and Glendale, they're pushing out now because people are having to go to West Valley and stuff to live. Um, so now these people who are moving their kids out there, they're moving too many of their kids out there, but they still have family and connections in these neighborhoods, and they're
Yeah.
taking that. So, it's spreading. And so West Valley's kind of the biggest epicenter from what I understand now. Um, but yeah, man, in short, that's kind of like quick little snippet, I guess. I don't know. I probably went off on a bunch of tangents, but that's the
Well,
story. That's the thing, right?
yeah, that's what this format's for. So from 19 to 27. Oh man, is prison like they talk about it? Is prison like they put it in movies? Is it over dramatized? Or because you spoke a little bit ago about how you guys were a small gang, a small clique, you had to team up with a larger crew. It sounded like you were one of those guys that everyone enjoyed, liked in a sense, right? All the different gangs, you got along with them. So um, just get in, put your head down, and get out. Or
Well, so I mean, I will say that the things that they say in movies is true, like rapes and murders and stabbings. Yeah, 100%. To what extent it happens in Utah prison is probably not the same extent that it happens in California. So they're probably basing a lot of these movies based on California prisons, which I would say it's true, but like it happens 100%. Rapes all the time. Um, Stabbings all the time. Murders not as often, but it's even getting a little worse now. I think they're averaging like one, maybe two a year now. Um, California prisons all the time, right? But they have different politics. Utah is very different because California prisons are usually run by the Sereno dudes, right? Serenos, Southsiders, and up north, it's Norteños. They usually run those yards, which like just like politics. That's actually called prison politics.
hmm,
They create the standards on how people have to operate, right? In federal prison, it depends. Right? I've been in federal prison too, and it depends where you're at. If you're in some California prisons, you're probably going to deal with like the Serenos. If you're down in Texas area, you'll probably have like the Texas Syndicates or the Longhorns or any of those um, Mexican gangs down there. Like to the East Coast, you got like the DC Blacks, which like everybody from DC because it's like what is it, a territory or whatever.
mhm.
Well, everybody there goes to federal prison. They don't have a state, so
Okay.
yeah, and it's just so out there like a different group of politics. Utah's Utah's pretty open. It depends on where you're at, right? Um, the biggest showing like in solid area is probably like the Polynesians. Um, they're just more solid area, but you have like the Aryan guys that are there. You have you don't really have like any like the Black Gorilla family or the Five Percenters or any of those black gangs or the bloodlines that you do in federal prison, but you'll have like the Bloods and Crips and the GDs between the blacks. And the Mexicans can be well. Utah's kind of weird, so it can be intermixed with cultures and gangs. But the Mexicans is usually like a Sureño Norteño kind of deal, or an Ogden, right? Which is very distinct rivalries. Um, yeah, so it happens. The politics are getting a lot worse here. They're getting a lot more serious. Um, you're still getting this influx of California gangs who are coming, and then they come established with this set of rules and these set of bylaws, and they set up a structure. And once that starts to happen, then it forces everybody else to form a structure, right? The Polynesians, whatever car you ride with, your crip, you have to start forming these structures, which are your governance. So prison is very governing, very governed. Because if we're playing basketball and it's two different races and we're getting competitive and we start pushing and shoving, that fight can cause a race war, right? So you have to say, okay, they'll pull people aside and they'll say, okay, well, here's the deal. Is this big? Is it that big of a deal, or can you just dap it up and be cool? If it's that big of a deal, then it goes down, and then wherever that goes, right? So there's a lot of rules that kind of protect things from happening, but there's also things that have to go down, you know, as people. But so yeah, I mean, I guess in a short way, it's not as bad in Utah prison just because we don't have numbers, right? I think Utah prison holds 6,500 people or something like that, maybe even less. California has like 50, 60,000 people in a state, and then another, probably 50,000 people in federal prisons. So I'm sure it's a lot different, right? But federal prison is very, very different. Federal prison is very, very structured.
And with that structure and that governance and that politics, I assume the guys at the top are very intelligent individuals, and I would assume they, as much as they know violence and that's all they know, they probably try to shy away from it, right? Because it causes so much trouble. But at some point, something has to happen if it gets out of hand. But they probably shy away from it because it's probably bad for business in a sense. Or am I just completely ignorant to that because I've watched too many movies?
No, no, no. I mean, it's you do want peace, right? You want to
Yeah.
be able to want peace, but you always have these stragglers who, some people get strung out on drugs. Some people get caught up in the store and just think they can't pay. But for the most part, yeah, you try to keep peace. That's the goal. It's not just like all out war. But that peace can shift, right? Like if somebody comes and hits a yard and they beat up somebody's sister or uh, shot somebody's homie or whatever, or did something that they have to, answer for, that could shift a whole yard, right? It could shift a whole yard. So then they go and they have people. There's people that are just designed. Okay, this is your dude. You got to go handle this, right? And if it can't be handled, if they come back and bring that, but they try their best to keep peace,
Yeah.
right? Everybody wants to live as peaceful as you can get, but
Yeah. What is when you got out? This is where my cousin was talking to me a lot about. When you got out, what finally made you make that change? Because you do some incredible stuff right now.
thank you. So I'd probably have to back it up a little bit.
Please.
So, um, in 2008, I got out,
Okay.
and um, I had just at 36 months was as long as they could keep you on parole, and I just ran the clock out, and I got off, and I went to move to Las Vegas. It's the only other place I really kind of knew at that time, and
Okay.
that was from my hustling days. Because we go hustle back and forth from LA to um, Vegas, and so we just always. I went there and I was just shocked. I was just like, all right, well, I'm off parole, right? Like I go do for the first time since I was 13 years old. I'm off paper or in prison, right? So that whole span, I've never had a time off of probation. I was always on probation, parole, or locked up. So I was just kind of shocked, and I went out to Las Vegas, and I got a job driving roofing shingles in Vegas, delivering roofing shingles in 100 something degree heat.
Mhm.
But it was the only thing I knew. I got a CDL, and I had no skills, no employable skills. At this time, I had zero work experience. Probably maybe had like a total of 4 or 5 months, and it was probably 2 or 3 week increments, right? Just long enough. I mean, usually be my mom's husband would give me a job long enough to make pro happy because I was hustling. As
Mhm.
soon as I got out of prison, very so I got out to Vegas and I was there for about a year. I went to college and finished up my degree, and um, about a year later, the marshals came and arrested me at work for a cold case. So my homies got indicted on a RICO Act for selling for a big drug bust, like a drug ring here, and they were coming out to Las Vegas, and I was hooking them up with hotels because I knew everybody out there. So I'd get them like these nice suites, you know what I mean? I just get it hooked up, so they got me for money laundering, and so I they arrested me in Las Vegas. They extradited me back to Utah. Um, I had the money to get bail out and get an attorney, and I fought my case and went back for 4 years. But when I went back, I told myself, "All right, you got a foundation." Because as soon as I bailed out, I went back to Las Vegas, and my boss said, look, I wrote you in as a no call, no show, so I can't hire you back for 90 days. But I'll hire you back. And they came to my work, mind this, they came to my place of employment and arrested me, U.S. Marshals, right? But he was like, I don't know that guy. He's like, I know who you are, and you're the best, one of the best workers I've. Um, so when I went back, I just said, at least I have a foundation. At least I can go back. Nothing else. I could finish up and I could pay my whatever I owe him on this time, and I could go back to Las Vegas and I could work for this guy, right? So I knew right there, I was like, okay, now I don't have to go back to hustling. And I was making, I think at the time I was making like 18, 19 bucks an hour, but I'd always hit these bonuses and stuff. So at that time I was making maybe 18, 1900 bucks every 2 weeks. And it was during the crash in 2000, and the crash in
Mm-hmm.
the real estate crash. So that was like good money, right? For me, I had a house for like $1,000 in Las Vegas, and I was like, okay, I could live off of this. Um, so I knew if nothing else, like I had a foundation.
Yeah.
And then um, I had met I had met this girl who was really into her healing path, um, and we dated for this about 6 months of my time that I was fighting this charge on bail, and she kind of like exposed me to that environment. Um, and eventually, I had to go and pay my due time on my charges. And while I was fighting my charge, I was trying to take a plea deal, and my attorney went to the prosecutor and presented with the plea deal, and he said, "Nah, this guy's a career offender, and he's going to get charged as a career offender." So, she brought that news back to me, and I was just shook. I was like, "Shit, I'm a career offender." And even though I didn't feel that way, well, I didn't feel like I met the criteria. Like I've been doing this my whole life, right? So in some other aspect, I was a career offender. Yeah. So at that time, around that same time, my mom had a stroke, and I was just sitting in jail, just kind of like shit, man. So, I just prayed, um, and I just told God, I was like, if you give me another shot, like I'll get out and make it happen, So, um, I I agreed to do a concurrent sentence between the state and the feds because I had a state and a federal charge. I agreed to go do 12 years in the feds, and the prosecutor agreed to let me go run my state time concurrent. It was a pretty common thing that they did. Well, I went in front of the sentencing judge, and he says, "No, no." He was a judge. He was just about to leave the bench, and he says, I'm not going to make this decision as I walk away from the bench feeling good with my legacy." So he sentenced me to my state time. And luckily enough for me, the because my matrix was like 14 years in the state, um, they the feds agreed to let me go just do my state time after I did my time in the feds. I just had to go do 36 months in the feds, and then I went back. Um, I was able to do RDAP in the feds, which is like a residential drug program, because I was the first time now it was a nonviolent charge. So I got a year off. So after 24 months, I went to the state, and my pastor, who was very instrumental in this whole thing. So let me go back a little bit. So when I got sentenced in the feds, my pastor and the federal judge were really, really good friends. And my pastor, he I asked him to write me a letter, and I didn't see a letter come through because whenever you get anything, they give it to you in your discovery. And when I went to my federal sentencing judge, he said, I I got a phone call from a really good friend of mine, and he told me about what he knows about you, right? And he said he can't speak to your past, but what he knows about you is this is who he's known over the time that you've been at his church. Um, and my judge spoke nothing but life into me, dude. Nothing but life. He's like, hey, man, like you have this. I see this paperwork. I see everything you've done, but I hear this about you. So, um, then I went to go do my, then I went to go do my stay time, and
What year was this?
this was 2012. No, 2014. 2014. Um, so I caught the case in 2012, but I was on bail for a
You
while.
gotta stop crying, man, because you got
No, that's me, man. You're cool. Um,
it. You got
no,
it.
it's just crazy when you retell your story and you live it, right? Yeah. So not to leave my, I want to backtrack just a bit, but I'll come back.
Okay.
So I met my pastor. I was dating this girl who wrote for the Tribune, and she went and wrote this 35th year anniversary um, on my pastor and asked me to go with her. Calvary Baptist Church right here, 1090 South State. Um, and I just went there and I heard the deacon talk about being homeless on the streets, strung out on drugs, you know. And so I was just like, cool, man. Like I could be me, right? I don't gotta be ashamed. And I knew so many of the people there because it was kids I grew up with parents, you know. But when I moved to Vegas, it was by my pastor's recommendation. He sent me to a church out there, Victory. I went to Victory Baptist Church. Um, but when I went to prison, there was one remaining board member, a hearing officer. His name was Green, something Green, and he, little beknownst to me, my pastor at one time was the chair of the board, and that guy, I think it might have been Rob. No, I don't want to say it's Robert Green. I think that's the author. His name is Green, but he was the last remaining hearing officer that was around from when my pastor was uh, chaired the board of pardons, and he said the same thing. He's like, my friend gave me a call, you know. So the JRI, which was like a Justice Reinvestment Act, had just hit in Utah, and that meant that they had to go by guidelines, right? So I didn't have a lot of charges in my life. I had just had violent charges. Like all my charges are violent or high level drug charges. Um, um, but I didn't have a lot, right? So the Matrix gave me like 60 months. So I was like, okay, I know I'm going home. I know I'm going home. I know in 6 years I'm going home, or 5 years I'm going home. So um, I just told all the homies, I just like, look, man, my mom just had a stroke. Like I'm trying to get back to my mom, you know. And they all just let me do my thing, man. Like they didn't hold me to the code, you know. Like you could do two things, right? There's two ways to do prison. You could do prison, or you could just stay out the way, you know. And I just told them, I was like, look, bro, I know I know you guys are gonna want me to get you a plug out there, and I know you guys are gonna want this, and I know you guys are gonna want that, but I just want to stay out the way, you know. So they all gave me the heads up and the code to just stay out the way, and I went back to prison, and my gang, there was one guy left, and he decided to click up with the Norteños. So when I went back, there was this AB wreck because they had just killed a Sereno guy, and they just killed this one Sereno and one Norteño, and they put a green light out on him. And I went in there, and there was this kid that I grew up with, Dopey, And he was like, I pulled up in his cell, and he was like, you know, we're at war, right? He's like, you know that they just got somebody just dropped information that you walked into the store, so they know you're here. They know your name, they know all that. So just so you know, when we step out, they'll get you if you don't get them. And I was just like, fuck. I was like, I ain't even been around this shit. Like me and the older homies are out here driving lowriders, doing our thing, right? Like that ain't us. So I had the opportunity to go to a drug program out there called Conquest, and it was a year long, but it was a Norteño yard. It was a year long, and it sucked because like I never really struggled with drug abuse, and it was sucked in a lot of ways because one, it was a dorm, 60 men in the dorm. It was very structured. Like having to hear stories about people go through substance abuse was hard for me because all my siblings struggle with that shit.
Uh-huh.
So having to hear that and like hear about the traumas they dealt with and stuff, like, but I did it, and then I could stay there one more year if I did a cook program. So I went to Davis Applied Technology Center and took a year to do a cook certificate, and so I did that, and then
What's a cook certificate?
like to cook, learn how to cook.
Cook. Oh, I didn't know if that was like an acronym for something. Okay.
Oh no, no, no! It's I think it's like, I don't know. They teach you cooking basics, like how to bake bread and
Oh,
cooking techniques,
okay.
right? And then then at that point in time you're supposed to leave the facility because there's no more programming you can do. But um, to stay, you also had to do a thing called you had to give back, right? So you had to find something to give back. So there was this class, and it was called Gogi, and I said that I would take over the Gogi class, and I would bring all the knuckleheads would come to my class because we just chop it up, right? And I just like, look, bro, we're here for an hour. Let's just make it work, right? Let's just
What's a
make it happen.
what's a Gogi class?
Bogies is this program created by like I think it's California prisoners called Getting Out by Going In. It gives you these set of these really basic tools to like.
Okay.
So I ran the Gogi program, and during that time, um, these other gentlemen introduced a program called the Real Transition. It was um, the LDS volunteers, and a guy that had been in prison, and they developed this transition program. And the LDS Church would give you 2 months at a sober living house if you did the program. They would pay for it. But the program was pretty cool, and I eventually went from taking the program to leading the program.
Okay.
And it was based a big part of the book was Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. Are you familiar with that book?
Uh-huh. Yeah, Brene Brown, yes.
Yeah, so it talked about vulnerability, so I started really pushing it.
Okay.
And I'd have all these like tattooed Aryans and Crip dudes in my class, just like,
Just
because I
ball.
told everybody, I was like, I'm going home. And I'm digging this therapy shit. And like, if it's gonna help me stay out, I'm gonna do the therapy, right? Because working in that and being able to move around that, I had access to therapists. So I was always sitting down there talking to a therapist
Mm-hmm.
on the hall, waiting for movement, always picking their brains. And um, it was during that time that I started learning the concepts that I wasn't fucked up. It was trauma, and it was like systems in place that like the school to prison pipeline, like all this stuff. So I said, okay, well, this shit ain't me, so I could fix it, right? Like I'm not broken beyond repair. Like that's what most people see, right? They get that guilt and shame. But I started noticing that I had a skill for teaching. So I got out and um, I started trying to do some stuff with the real transition and never really took off. But I started connecting with NeighborWorks, which was kind of interesting because I did a class there, and unbeknownst to me, the lady that ran it, she's actually retiring this year. Um, she was my probation officer,
Hmm.
best friend. So when she went to run, I would always see them together. My probation officer and her, they were best friends. But when she left, she went to go run NeighborWorks. So my probation officer sent me to NeighborWorks, it was called the Youth Works program. So 30 years later, I go to NeighborWorks to do like a home buyer workshop. And then I started taking classes, the Westside Leadership Institute, and um, Maria started really putting me in these spaces and opening doors. And at the same time, my therapist um, was taking me inside the secure care, the juvenile secure care, and it was through a thing called the peer support specialist training. It's a certification you can get here in Utah. Um, and after it was through Bike Utah, we taught the kids bike mechanics. Um, so on one end, I'm learning these leadership skills. On the other end, I'm having connections to inside the facilities to work with youth. So I was able to cross. And then during that same time, I was taking a bunch of these entrepreneur classes. Like I did uh, the Mill Everyday Entrepreneur. I did Goldman Sachs. Like the first felon to be admitted into a Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business locally.
You were?
Um, yeah. So I was able to get all this stuff, and I started saying, okay, well, shit, if I could do it, then maybe I could. If I can go get far enough, I can convince people that if
They could
we
do it too.
invest in people, that we could duplicate this. I don't think I'm special.
Yeah.
I know it takes a lot of work, but I feel that there's a lot of people that we can get up to this place. So I just started taking that and I started networking and leveraging connections and building, and people saw that I was actually doing the work. So I was able to get like people with lived experience, put them with the DA, which is where we met Annie. Um, just make all these connections and put people in places, and then I could step away, right? So um, I know that's kind of a long answer, but yeah, man, I really started when I saw that I can stay out of prison and I had a base. And then as soon as I got that parole date, it was just like confidence, 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 confidence. And I was like, nothing else. I go back to Vegas and run shingles, right?
Yeah.
I'm in prison working out. I'm like, I'm healthy enough. They just let me go into sales when I got arrested. So I was like, okay, he'll give me a trajectory, right? He'll still give me a path. I can go
Yeah.
sell. And at that time, there was a guy who had been to prison selling building materials in Vegas for our yard. So I was like, okay, if nothing else, like I can go back and work for this company. So I just saw at that time I had a foundation and I had a place, and I can go back to Vegas and stay away from Utah, right? So to
So
me, that was it.
so the first one into Goldman Sachs, doing all these classes, is that what you're working on now? Is there a specific program that you've built? Is there a name for it that you're working
Yeah.
with other prisoners to get them go down that same path?
So what I do, so I have an organization. So I do consulting.
Yeah.
My consulting business is called Purpose Driven Partners. Um, so I do a few things. So when we find like grassroots organizations, and I have a lot of connections with larger organizations like banks and stuff like that. So I try to find best partnerships, bring them together, and then help this grassroots really understand what these guys need from you
Mhm.
to give you money, right? Which is like organizational structure. Are you 501c3? Do you need um, a fiscal sponsors? Like, what does it really take for you to make this partnership work and last? And make sure that these guys have that understanding. Then I do like corporate social responsibility, which is I these organizations will reach out to me and they say, hey, you know what? We really want to make an impact, and how can you connect us to these groups, right? So not only do I connect them, but I make sure that everything's in place to make sure the real ones, right? But it's all has to be purpose and mission driven. And then through entrepreneurship, I do a ton of workshops, and then I do like LLC formations, and a lot of the times I get sponsorships. Like Zion's Bank is so I do LLC formations for companies for like $350, and they're usually sponsored by like the Black Chamber or other organizations. And I'll just ask them, hey, I got 10 small businesses. This is what we need. Um, and then I help them get prepared for like the Mill Everyday Entrepreneur Program or Goldman Sachs or Science Bank's entrepreneur program or 1 million black businesses, whatever I feel like is going to be the best fit for them. And that's all through building connections too. Like I have connections with Operation Hope, like 1 million black businesses, the Black Chamber. Um, so I just make sure that that's there. And then I will also help create curriculum and programs um, for people who have like the day one guys. They do a lot of really good work. They, how do we get these guys that have these really good ideas coming out of prison? How do we get them into a place where they can execute on those ideas and build the life sustainability and give back, right? That's the whole goal of what it is like, how do we get you to leverage, right? Because we may not be able to take the traditional path of you coming out at 55, 60 with no workable skills. You're too old to work physical labor, but you're very smart because you've been reading books and taking classes, and now you're trying to get back. Like, so now how do we get you to a place where these people, so my biggest thing I'm working on currently right now is I have a peer support model that's, instead of a 40-hour model, it's an 18-month model, and it takes them through like trauma informed care. But at 40 weeks or 40 hours, we can get them payable through like Medicaid and other programs. But then we give them like the scaffolding really to like work with youth.
Mm-hmm.
And we're finalizing the partnership with Department of Health and Human Services to be able to get them guys as um, embedded consultants. So they'll be able to go inside the juvenile facility, and they're not necessarily staff, right? We pay them, but they get to go and hang out with the kids. But they're usually these bigger Polynesian guys or these big white dudes that have been in prison, or you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to give back, and they have this purpose. So they're more likely to be able to get in there and break up tension, or really be able to talk these youngsters down from saying like, I gotta go get this dude, and be like, do you really need to get him, bro? Like, you can go home, but at 25, but if you go smash this dude for basketball, like, you're not going home, going to prison. So that's kind of mainly what I'm doing, working on right now. Um, but I also do a lot with NeighborWorks. So I'm a board member there. Um, I sit on a couple committees, Youth Works and Community Engagement Committee. I also help with the Community Leadership Institute there. And then I teach the Westside Leadership Institute, which it teaches leadership on the West Side, Rose Park, Glendale, West Valley. We have like fundamentals, workshops, startups. They all, from base understanding, finding a community issue and how do you solve it in 16 weeks. That's the first phase. Second phase is workshops, which takes you from that phase up to how do you sponsor like a bill. And then the next one, startups, will take you how to like create a social innovative business model or a nonprofit. So that's kind of what I work on currently.
You're a busy man.
Yeah, man. It's good though. I love what I do. Um, all of it
Yeah.
centered around service to like youth that are experiencing incarceration, or, other people who, just are trying to look for resources. I'm built on community, like
Mm-hmm.
on my all of the skill sets I got, all of the leadership, all of my training, everything is built from community programming. So I'm very like locked in. I'm community. That's what I do. That's how I make my living. That's how I live my life. All based around community and serving like other people.
Have you seen it over the years getting better? With this shift on this planet, consciousness and the craziness and everything. They say before creation comes destruction. So with you being as entrenched as you are with all of that you're doing, is it getting better? Is it getting tougher? Is it getting easier? Is there more people getting involved? Uh, are the pathways to what you're looking to help these people with becoming more open? What are you experiencing with that?
Yeah. So it's funny because I just had a conversation with my friend Solo, and he just went into the prison. He's like, dude, these guys are so much further along than we were at that age. So that's one. Yeah, but there's a lot more people who realize that we were misled. That
Mm-hmm.
this age of like, I would say maybe like 42 to 55, like our age group, that age group realized that we was really just misled, right? Now we want to get back. And with the rise of people like stuff that I'm doing, the stuff that this other my other homie Smacks is doing, the stuff that the Day One is doing, the stuff that the Peace Circle is doing. By them doing it and having the motion that they have and putting it out on social media and all that stuff, everybody gets to see it. Now they're like, shit, it could be done.
Mm-hmm.
And when they want to do it, then that's where I step in. I'm like, you want to do it? Here's this. Let's get it. We can do it. I can help you, or I can get you in the right hands and help you get the information you need, right? But they have to go through it themselves because then they got to experience like what it takes, right, to go through it. But very much so. I'm really excited. I'm excited because, initially we were going to the secure care and we would just hang out with them. But now they got the hip hop in there. Uh, and Kim from Day One and that group got the hip hop in there and they're teaching kids hip hop, but they're making them conform. They're like, not conform. They're making them agree to these rules. Like, you got to stay out of trouble. You got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. If you do this, we'll come in every week and we'll bring hip hop in. We'll teach you how to write. We'll teach you how to make a beat, which I love. I believe like hip hop is the language of the youth. We can connect with them that way, right? So connection is what you need. The problem with, or I think the struggle with in those facilities is the rules that in place don't allow the staff to connect with those kids.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the rules. There's limitations, right? Whether it's ethical or there's some kind of HIPAA or whatever kind of thing. Like they can't, but we can go in there and connect with them. So seeing like that going on, we got them letting us in those facilities is a game changer. And other people seeing that we're getting this stuff out like through social media, through podcasts, through stuff like that. Other people are starting to say like, "Hey, we can do it," right? And everybody has a different target, right? Like I, I tell people, I was like, I don't care if there's 100 of us doing this. We need thousands of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I reach capacity at a certain amount of people or kids or time or being at certain places. And like with hip hop, we got eight out of 30 kids, right? So that just lets you know that that's that's a small percentage, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to get those other kids? So the more people in there with the more ideas, right, that are going to show attention to those kids. So, yeah, man, there's so many cool things going on right now. So many. I'm really super excited. Uh, Day One is really killing it with you know backpack to school. Uh, Man, that was really crazy. Probably had 800, 900, or not 800, 300, 400 people come in. We have like the lowrider community come in. We have the tattoo shop where we have community events all the time, free events. People can come in. If you sell a product, you can set up a booth, set up bounce houses. That's my friend Mesa. He's like providing people coming out of prison with that can tattoo. He provides them a space there. He provides them with like the business structure that they need, helps them form a business, like a brand, all that stuff. So there's a lot of people doing a lot of things. So it's really pushing it, I think, for more people to be out there and um, do more stuff.
Do they, with the juveniles or anyone in prison, do they talk a lot about meditation just because they've got so much alone time and the mind's going crazy? Do they do anything with meditation or anything like that, or is it more prayer based, religious based type of stuff?
No, so they do have people that go in. Um, I think where there may not be the strongest connection is sometimes it's the way it's put out there. It's usually like some lady that does yoga kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I recently started doing like the balance app. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've heard about it. Yes.
Um, but it's very simple. It's like, how many minutes a day do you want to try? Okay, I want to start at 3. But the way they talk you through it is now that these guys got tablets, I think it'd be something cool. But I don't feel enough people are using it because it's that stigma,
Mm.
right? Like you can't be gangster and be doing meditation, right?
Hmm.
It's just there's a unfortunately that gang culture still is in there, and
Yeah.
that runs.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some people that go in, they do yoga and stuff like that.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I've always when I hear stories like this, I always think of meditation because yoga has got a stigma, and like you said, meditation as well. But just because they've got so much time to themselves, so many thoughts, the power of the mind, kind of like what you've been through, what you go through, what you're doing now, how you're helping these guys think in a different way, right? It can happen, and certain forms of meditation can help people kind of expand that awareness so they can deal with those thoughts on a
Yeah.
easier, better basis. So, wow, wow, man, um, unbelievable. And everything you're doing, I know we got to kind of wrap up here. Everything you're doing, you just started doing. You just started asking questions. You just started talking to people because you've
Yeah.
got these amazing connections. It's not like you came with them. You just started asking questions and pushing.
Yeah. That's where it was all at. I feel like um, you're just showing up when
Yeah,
people invite me to stuff. Be present with the mural projects, stuff like that. Like open doors, a lot of doors. But also like learning how to tell my story in a way that is empowering, right? Like that's huge. Um, I I think someone, I can't remember it, but they was like learn to tell your story from an empowering position, right? And it could like never has that power over you to be like destructive. So um, when you learn how to tell your story better, and what you learn from it. Um, but I've also like been able to like I've been fortunate to have a therapist to help me understand and learn concepts so I could explain it to other people in ways that they could understand. Right?
mm-hmm,
The conversations I have with people that got out of prison sound very different
mm-hmm.
than the conversations I have with like a mental health therapist or somebody who understands on that terminology, right? Somebody that's in that field. So being able to translate, I think is kind of huge. It's really,
Yeah, you've gotten better at telling your story. Something that catches their attention. They can resonate with it. Two last questions. I'm trying to figure out which one would be better first. Where can people go? How can people help? How can people who are going to listen to this, watch this, how can they support you? Is there a website that they can, what can they do?
I would say I have my business is purposedrivenpartners.org.
First.org.
Purpose Driven Partners just has it spelled out, no
Okay.
nothing else. .org. You could connect with me there, and then I'd love to like connect with you and see if there is a way to partner, or if you'd love to support. We're always open to that. And support doesn't necessarily have to come in a monetary form. It could be a connection. It could be hey, it's advice. Somebody that's been through, maybe has experience with businesses, and maybe has a resource that they can connect into. But yeah, purposedrivenpartners.org would be the easiest. And then it's Michael at purposedrivenpartners.org would be my email.
Is there anything specific, more specific that you're looking for currently, like a certain um, business or a certain facility or a certain anything like that in this moment?
I would say as as we hope to expand this year, which is the plan to really put forth a lot of energy January 1. Um, I would love to find more partners where we could provide a service. When we do provide a service to individuals, we in part of our social responsibility model is part of the service that we provide will also provide 100% of service for a small business. So whether it be like a formation, anything, and we yes, and any kind of partners, even if it's we can facilitate. I love being part of coalitions where we can execute on projects as a team, coming from different organizations. Um, yeah, and then just to continue to like share the message and try to find ways if you have ways that may be able to help the youth in these secure facilities. We're open.
Okay, beautiful. And one last question I ask all the guests: What is truth to you?
Truth to me is full transparency, vulnerability.
Hmm.
Um, not really trying to put on a show, right? Just being authentic and just, hey man, here's this is just me, right? And it's for me, like I feel like I live in my truth, so um, I don't really trip on how people see me, right?
Well, one of the unique things about that question is there's always a very large gap. I will ask that question and you'll hear a lot of hums and ha's and sometimes a few minutes of silence before they're really thinking about it. You were the only one in about 20 episodes that immediately answered that question, the authenticity. So that's incredible because that's exactly who I see. There's nothing behind your eyes but your truth, your authenticity, and what you want to do with the world. There's no holding back. There's nothing about your story that you take away. And one of the things I've always talked about, one of the things I'm working on myself is, they always say love is the highest vibration, the frequency, and they've actually done studies. It's authenticity, actually.
Oh,
Authenticity is the highest frequency because that authenticity includes a love, includes who you are, includes what your soul wants to do, it includes all of that. And that authenticity means everything.
yeah.
Whoever that human being is, when they're in their authentic self, that's the vibration that brings in the most people. And that's obviously why you've been able to do what you've done. I'm so glad this has happened, Michael. I'm so glad you
Yeah,
gave me
man.
an hour. I'm so
Congratulations.
glad Annie connected us. I'm so glad that you were able to share. So I'll get this cleaned up, edited, and we'll get it out to the world probably next week or the week after that.
Cool, man. I'm excited. Thank you.
Michael, thank you, man. I will see you in a little bit, and I'll keep texting you if you ever need anything from me. Let me know.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. See you, bud.